Welcome to the Ear Philosophy channel. Today, we use the turn of epistemology to explain how to apply reverse philosophical engineering in the AI era. This is our magic weapon to face today's era of artificial intelligence, allowing us to control AI, develop AI, and transcend AI.
Yeah, which is a massive claim to start with, isn't it? Calling something a magic weapon usually sounds like, I don't know, marketing hype. But when you really dig into the research for this deep dive into the stack of notes we've got here today, you realize we aren't talking about a new software update.
Right.
We are talking about a fundamental shift in how we think.
And frankly, the term itself, reverse philosophical engineering, or RPE as the notes call it, it kind of stopped me in my tracks.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it sounds like a contradiction in terms. Like, you reverse engineer a toaster.
Right.
You reverse engineer a line of code or a competitor's product. You don't really reverse engineer a thought, or at least I didn't think you could.
Well, that's exactly the hook here. The source material argues that thoughts, philosophies, and even these wildly complex AI models, they all have an underlying architecture.
Hmm.
Just like a software engineer strips away the compiled binary code, right? The ones and zeros that the machine actually reads
Yeah.
to find the source code written by a human, we can basically strip away the complex language of philosophy to find the structural truth underneath.
So instead of getting bogged down in the jargon or the specific words used by a philosopher or an AI, we are essentially looking for the operating system.
Precisely. We are looking for the logic that drives the output. And this is critical right now because, let's be honest, traditional philosophy has a bit of a branding problem. The source material actually calls philosophers contradiction manufacturers.
I'd actually laughed out loud at that line when I read it.
Good, right.
Contradiction manufacturers. It just feels incredibly accurate. You open any history of philosophy book, and it is just a catalog of fights.
Yep.
It's materialism versus idealism, East versus West, rationalism versus empiricism. It seems like the whole point of the discipline is just to find something to disagree with.
Well, I mean, it keeps the tenure committees happy, doesn't it?
True.
If everyone agreed, there would be absolutely nothing to publish. But the method we are unpacking today, reverse philosophical engineering, it flips that script entirely. It relies on a concept called philosophical hermeneutics,
Okay.
specifically from the work of a guy named Hans-Georg Gadamer.
Okay, hold on. Hermeneutics. That is a $10 word right there.
It is a bit heavy.
I feel like we need to ground that for the listener who's, maybe driving to work right now before we move on.
Fair point. At its core, it is simply the art of interpretation. But Gadamer's version has a really specific twist, which is the affirmation of everything.
The affirmation of everything.
Right. Instead of approaching a text or an idea asking, is this right or wrong? You start by assuming the text has a piece of the truth relative to its own context. You aren't fighting it. You are trying to merge your horizon with its horizon.
A fusion of horizons, I think the notes called it.
Exactly.
So it is less of a debate and more of a merger. You assume there is value there, and your job is to find it.
Right. You strip away the interface, the specific words, the cultural bias, the time period, all of that, just to find the source code. And once you have the source code, you can understand it, edit it, optimize it, or connect it to entirely different systems.
I think I buy the theory. It sounds really nice. But, I need to see the blueprints.
Let's do it.
Because the research highlights a specific case study before we even get to AI, and it sounds like a philosophical cage match. Immanuel Kant versus Cheng Hao.
Oh, yeah.
And on paper, this looks like a mess.
It is the ultimate mismatch. In the red corner, you have Immanuel Kant, 18th century German, rigid, the father of Western rationalism.
Critical philosophy.
Right. Everything is duty, logic, and law. He is the guy who famously said you should never lie, even if a murderer is at your front door asking where your friend is.
Right. Very strict. And in the blue corner, you have Cheng Hao, 11th century Song, dynasty sage, Neo-Confucianism. Everything is about Ren benevolence and just flowing with nature.
Traditionally, scholars would put them in the ring and say these two are totally incompatible. Oil and water, logic versus intuition, Western rigorousness versus Eastern flow.
But if we apply this reverse philosophical engineering, we aren't looking at the surface language. We aren't looking at the fact that one writes in dense German and the other in Chinese. We're looking for the source code.
Yes.
So what happens when we do that?
You find out they're running the exact same operating system.
Really?
Look at Kant. He talks about moral religion and the categorical imperative. He believes humans have this mysterious internal drive to legislate their own moral law. That is what he calls absolute freedom.
Internal legislation, acting out of a duty that comes from inside you, not because a policeman is watching or society tells you to.
Exactly. Now look at Cheng Hao. He talks about one-body Ren. The idea that your heart is fundamentally connected to all things. When you realize that connection, you achieve a state of joy and freedom. You act benevolently, not because you have to follow a rule, but because it is your nature.
Oh, wow. So Kant calls it self-legislation,
Right.
and Cheng Hao calls it one-body Ren, but functionally.
Functionally, they are both solving the exact same problem. How does a human being navigate the tension between the physical world, where we get hungry and tired and selfish, and the moral world, where we want to be good?
Yeah.
They both conclude that the answer is an internal, autonomous drive toward the good. RPE completely dissolves the East versus West contradiction.
It is just two different user interfaces for the same back-end logic.
Exactly.
This is actually a really powerful way to look at history.
It is. And if we can do this with dusty old philosophers, the source argues we absolutely have to do it with the biggest black box of our time, artificial intelligence.
And this is the pivot. The intro mentioned an epistemological turn. Now, usually when I hear the word epistemology, my eyes glaze over.
Most people's do.
It is the study of knowledge, how we know what we know. Why is this a turn? And why does it matter for AI?
Because the old way of thinking about knowledge was very separate. It was, I am a subject looking at an object. I am here. The AI is over there. I study it like a bug under a microscope.
Okay.
The turn, which is heavily influenced by Heidegger, by the way, says, no, we are being in the world. We are part of the system we are studying. We are in the messy soup of reality together.
So we can't stand outside of it. We're influencing the AI with our prompts and our data, and the AI is influencing us right back.
Exactly. And to navigate that soup, the notes outline 3 specific stages of knowledge. And I want to take our time here because the source implies these are the tools, the actual mechanics we need to deal with things like large language models today.
Let's break these down because this feels like the core framework of the deep dive. Stage 1 is epistemetrics.
Right. Metric knowledge. Think of this as the algorithm. It is the ability to use one principle to calculate many things. This is where current AI lives. It is purely mathematical. It processes billions of data points to find correlations.
So when an AI writes a poem about a sunset, it isn't feeling emotion.
No.
It isn't remembering a beautiful sunset it saw over the ocean. It is performing epistemetrics. It is calculating the statistical probability of the next word being golden or horizon.
Precisely. It is powerful, it's incredibly fast, but the source calls it non-authentic. It has no being, it is just syntax. It's like a librarian who has memorized the exact shelf location of every book in the building, but has never cried over a single story.
That is a fantastic image. So that is the machine layer. That leads us to stage 2, which is epistemocardia.
Cardia meaning the heart-nature knowledge. This draws on the philosopher Wang Yangming, who famously said, heart is reason. And this isn't just about fleeting emotions like I feel sad today.
Right.
It is about value judgments, morality, taste, the subjective human experience that gives the math actual meaning.
So the AI provides the metrics, the data, the options, the probabilities, but the human provides the heart, the value, the ethical decision.
Exactly. The AI can calculate the absolute most efficient route to a destination, but only epistemocardia can decide if that destination is actually worth visiting.
And if you combine them perfectly. Because the notes mention a third stage,
Stage 3 is epistemonetica.
which sounds like a sci-fi term, honestly.
It does. It translates to decentralized knowledge. But don't think crypto or blockchain here. Think of flow. In this stage, the knowledge becomes a seamless extension of you. You aren't consciously thinking about the algorithm in stage 1, and you aren't agonizing over the moral rule in stage 2. You are just acting.
This corresponds to the Eastern concept of wu wei, right? Effortless action.
Yes, exactly. Think of a master jazz musician. They know the music theory inside out, that's the metric. They have the soul and the feeling, that's the heart. But when they are actually playing a solo on stage, they aren't thinking about the notes or the feelings, they just flow. That is epistemonetic.
Okay, so that is the theory. Metric, heart, flow. But let's apply this to the headlines, because the research brings up a major event from 2024, the Nobel Prize in Chemistry, going to the Google DeepMind team for AlphaFold.
This is the perfect example of this epistemological turn in action. Demis Hassabis and John Jumper solved a 50-year-old grand challenge in biology, which was predicting protein structures.
And for those who don't know, protein folding is notoriously difficult.
Yeah.
There are more ways a single protein can fold than there are atoms in the universe.
Exactly. It's mind-boggling. And
Right.
they didn't solve it by just being better traditional chemists than everyone else. They didn't just pour more chemicals into beakers in a lab.
No, they shifted the paradigm.
They stopped treating proteins just as physical biological objects and started treating them as text. They realized that the amino acid sequence is basically a language. They applied epistemetrics to biology.
They use the algorithm to predict the 3D structure from the sequence, just like a language translator predicts the next word in a sentence.
And here's the part I love, and it's right there in the notes. When the researchers asked the AI Gemini about this breakthrough, Gemini actually admitted it. It said AlphaFold's success was a victory of epistemology, not just raw computing power.
The AI knows it is all about how you structure the knowledge. That is wild.
It proves that if we want to master AI, we can't just treat it as a magic box. We have to reverse engineer it. We have to ask, what metric knowledge is this system using? How is it segmenting the world? We have to treat the AI output as a text to be deciphered, not as gospel truth to be accepted blindly.
But here is the tension I am feeling with all of this. The intro promised we would, quote-unquote, control and transcend AI.
Right.
But if AI is the ultimate master of epistemetrics, if it can calculate way better than I ever could, and AlphaFold proves it can calculate better than the best human scientist, Krein, how do I transcend it? It seems like I am hopelessly outmatched.
You are outmatched in stage one. You will never, ever outcalculate the machine. If you try to compete with AI on memorization or pattern matching, you lose every time. But the machine is stuck there. It has no stage two, it has no epistemocardia, it has no heart nature.
So our competitive advantage is having a soul. I mean, that sounds poetic, but is it practical?
It is incredibly practical. The source suggests that the future isn't about competing with AI on math. It is about building personal AI that is wrapped up in your own values.
What does that actually look like? Building a personal AI.
Well, imagine an AI that doesn't just give you the generic statistically probable answer scraped from the internet. Imagine an AI that filters the world through your specific ethics, your taste, your way. You use RPE to code your heart nature into the system itself.
So instead of the algorithm maximizing for engagement or clicks, which is what all social media algorithms do right now, it maximizes for my definition of the good.
Exactly. That is the path from learning, or Su in the source text, which is just accumulating data, to awakening, or Ju. The AI handles the heavy lifting of learning. It reads the million books for you. You handle the awakening. You decide what it actually means.
And if we get that right, we hit that third stage, decentralized knowledge.
We enter the flow state. The AI becomes a seamless tool. You navigate the world with it, but you aren't defined by it. It's like wearing glasses. You don't walk around looking at the glasses. You look through them to see the world more clearly.
That sounds incredible, but it puts a huge burden on the user, doesn't it? You can't program your heart nature into an AI if you don't know who you are. If you don't know what your own values are, you'll just get a generic reflection back.
Which brings us right back to philosophy. You have to reverse engineer yourself first. You have to find your own source code. Is it duty, like Kant? Is it benevolence, like Cheng Hao? You need to know that before you can code it into your digital assistant.
The research wraps this up with a metaphor that I think really lands this plane perfectly. The analogy of the moon.
It is a classic Buddhist concept, but it fits so perfectly here. It distinguishes between Yui, conditioned dharma, and Wu-wei, unconditioned dharma.
Let's stick to the visual, because
Yeah.
those Sanskrit terms can get a bit heavy for an audio deep dive.
Fair enough. The visual is simple. A finger pointing at the moon. The finger is the tool, the method, the AI algorithm. Even this conversation we are recording right now, it is necessary to show you where to look.
But the finger is not the moon.
Never. The moon is the truth, absolute freedom. The thing Kant and Cheng Hao were both staring at, the reality of things as they actually are.
The danger of the AI era is that the finger has become so high-tech, so shiny, and so unbelievably convincing that we start staring at the finger and completely forget about the moon.
We start thinking the AI is the truth rather than just a pointer to it. We think the map is the territory. RPE is about remembering the difference. It is about building a pure land of hermeneutics.
A pure land of hermeneutics. That is quite a phrase to end on.
It describes a space where we stop fighting over the tools. We stop fighting over East versus West, or human versus machine, and we use them to clear the clouds so we can see the moon. It's where human wisdom and AI calculation fuse to help us access the truth.
It really changes the way I look at the chaos of the internet today. All these conflicting ideas, all this AI noise everywhere, we shouldn't be afraid of the contradictions.
No, not at all. Contradictions are just opportunities for reverse philosophical engineering. They are invitations to dig for the source code. When you see a conflict, don't pick a side. Ask, what structural truth are both of these sides trying to express?
It moves us from being passive users, just consumers of content, to active architects.
That is the shift, from consumer to creator, from learning to awakening.
It is a powerful call to action. We have the sharpest tools in human history at our disposal, but that means we need the steadiest hands.
And the clearest hearts. You cannot outsource your conscience to an algorithm.
Before we go, I want to leave you, the listener, with a thought experiment based on what we've unpacked today. We talked about building a personal AI that reflects your heart nature.
The ultimate customization project.
Right. If you could do that today, if you could write a single line of code that defined the core value of your personal AI, what would that source code look like? Would you optimize for efficiency, for compassion, for curiosity? What is the one single value you would trust to filter the entire world for you?
That is the question that defines the source code of your life. And you don't need a computer to answer it.
Thank you for listening. I hope it will be helpful and inspiring to you. See you next time.